I would like to begin with a bit of a backstory regarding my NDE. I experienced a horrific trauma in 2004 when my husband was accused of a crime he did not commit. We had a 1-year-old daughter and I was 11 weeks pregnant with our baby when 6 U.S. Marshals entered our office handcuffing and shackling my husband in front of me. He was in prison for 5 months and we continued to fight this legal battle for many years. An experience like this changes a person, namely leaving me with intense PTSD. My body was in flight or fight every moment of every day. For many years I consistently felt a sense of dread, high level of anxiety in my gut, felt as if it were rotting inside. By 2012 I lived and breathed in anxiety and maladaptive stress. That year was also one of many changes in my life. My father had a severe heart attack and one of my older children moved away to university, to name a few. I spent a great deal of time attempting to calm my nervous system. One of the things I used was supplements to support calming my mind and body. I had a bottle of a liquid B complex and in a rush I didn't correctly read the dosage recommendations. I took a quarter cup rather than the suggested quarter teaspoon. After I had ingested the B complex supplement I quickly realized that something was wrong. I began having intense stomach spasms that lasted for several hours with bursts of sharp cramping and abdominal pain. By morning I was incredibly weak. Within hours the cycle of stomach spasms and gripping in my gut came on with greater intensity and continued for an additional 8 hours. This cycle repeated for several days with no relief. Fearing for my life I finally told my husband that I needed to go to the emergency room. With his medical background he was monitoring me but was hesitant in going the medical route, knowing there was nothing more that the medical doctors could provide than what we were already doing at home. When we arrived at the ER they ran some blood tests and lab work, concluding nothing more than gastritis. How could they not see how much pain I was in? I was released and sent home. I felt vulnerable and desperate for help. Hour after hour I became weaker and weaker. The next day I was too weak to walk, so my husband Scott carried me out to the living room couch to be with my family. With an open layout connected to the kitchen I could watch the activity of my family going about their day. Scott later walked into the kitchen to refill his coffee before heading to work. I called out to him for a glass of water. It was as if he heard nothing. I was less than 15 feet away from him, speaking as loudly as possible. With no response he quickly went out the door to work. I assumed that he was in a hurry and thought that I was asleep. Each person that came in that day had no response to my calls. I questioned whether I was in the twilight zone. Why didn't anyone see or hear me? I was speaking as loudly and clearly as I could and no one could hear me. It was sometimes visible to them that I was attempting to talk, so they would lean their ear toward my mouth and they still couldn't understand me. It took every ounce of my energy to say a few words inside my head. It sounded as though I was yelling externally. My family showed clear signs that they could not understand anything I was saying. Attempting to talk took so much of my energy that within a few moments I would be forced to give up, defeated and unheard. Drifting back into sleep the following evening I was alone in my bed. There was a gentle lifting sensation from my core, and then suddenly I was out of my body, standing at the foot of my bed with a soft glow around me. I was staring at my frail body in bed, the thick brown comforter pulled up around my neck. My hair was disheveled from the restlessness and I could see that my facial expression was still held in tension from the severe pain. I felt immediate compassion for the weakened state that my body was in, but I was finally free of pain. Relief and gratitude washed over me as I glanced over to the clock on my dresser and then back toward the lifeless body lying in bed. Being a mother conditioned me to check the time as if to measure whether my children were in need of me. Soon the sound of Scott's laughter down the hall caught my attention, and instantly I was standing in the living room. Scott was watching The Simpsons on TV. I was annoyed that he was letting our young girls watch that show with him, as I was always trying to protect their innocent minds. Being only 7 and 9 years old, I felt that adult humor was inappropriate for them. Scott was sitting on the couch with our daughter Chloe snuggled up against him. Our youngest daughter Sophie was playing with a few of her toys on the floor at his feet. I was hyper aware of everything, and yet they were completely unaware that I was standing there. I wanted to join them. I wanted to tell my husband to change the channel to a more age-appropriate show, but I knew they would not hear me. Simultaneously I could feel the expanse of my love for them as I watched their beautiful faces. In an instant we were no longer in my family room but on a long, clearly marked pathway. Scott was sitting on a large rock at the top of the path with Sophie on his lap, Chloe to his left, as well as our other children circled around him. I was grateful to see them all together as a family unit, but incredibly confused as to why we were there. I was moving away from them by an unknown source. Yet not feeling the ground below me, I locked eyes with Scott. First I heard him say, "I love you babe, I will be okay," and watched tears stream down his face. "Okay with what are you talking about?" Turning my attention to my oldest daughter Charlie, she was sobbing uncontrollably but managed to also say that she will be okay. Then to my second daughter Audrey, she was maintaining her strong disposition and was there with her boyfriend who was standing behind her with his arms comforting her. She looked at me and said, "Mom, it's okay, I will be alright too." This exchange continued with my son Donnie, and who also said that he would be okay. Chloe and Sophie were so young and needed their mother. Chloe could hardly speak through her crying but managed to say, "I will be okay mommy," and then buried her head into Charlie's chest. And then sweet Sophie, seeing the shock in her eyes, I could feel that the pain was overwhelming her and all that she could do was cling tightly to her father. I wanted to comfort her and tell her that I'm right here and I'm not going anywhere, yet the force was stronger than I, pulling me further away from my family. I was in a state of confusion. Why are we on this path? Why do they all keep telling me that they are okay? I'm not okay. I don't want to leave you. I want to be with you. Why isn't anyone stopping me? As I continued further on the path, my mother, father and siblings were standing together. Although my parents divorced when I was 9 years old, they remained on friendly terms with one another. They stood there comforting each other with the loss of their daughter, but even they didn't stop me from moving forward. My mom and I locked eyes. I knew she loved me very much and it pained her to see me go. Why wasn't she stopping me? I then passed by my siblings and their families. Behind my immediate family were members of my extended family, aunts, uncles and cousins, and further behind them were friends and different people in my life. It was as though every person that would be impacted by my dying was there to tell me that they would be okay without me. They all repeated the same thing to me: "We will be okay." No one pleaded with me to stay or told me that I would be missed. No one tried to stop me. There was no conversation, just a simple statement from each person that I loved: "I will be okay." As I involuntarily continued moving forward into the unknown and away from my family, at the end of the path I could see in front of me a dark building with sharp spires on the roof. There was a wrought iron fence around it with a very dilapidated yard that consisted of a tree in the front right corner and bushes along the gate. Black ravens were perched on top of the building staring down at me as I approached. It reminded me of a classic haunted mansion scenario that you would see in a movie and didn't resemble anything that I imagined of the spirit realm. My natural inclination in life was to avoid anything scary. I hated scary movies and refused to go to any haunted house during Halloween, but I did not feel fearful in any way. There was a calm that washed over me as an observer of what I was experiencing. As I arrived at the gate entrance, the dark building began to transfigure. The dead yellow grass began to show a vibrant green. The building transformed from a dark, sharp and frightening space to one that illuminated light. The sharp spires on the roof rounded. Even the ravens transformed into white doves. I could feel the vibration of love emanating from the building itself. As I approached the entrance of the building, it had completely transfigured before me into a beautiful golden building of light. 3 beautiful entities welcomed me. As I stepped through the threshold, there was a crystalline golden glow that illuminated from their core. They were all similar in size and form, and their brightness was so magnificent that it prevented me from making out any specific markings to differentiate one from another. I could feel that they loved me very much and that their knowledge was infinite, as was their love for humanity. These 3 entities seemed to oversee this specific area. They informed me that my soul was in transition and that my physical body was very ill. Until this point, my body looked just the way it had on Earth. I looked down as my outer self dropped away from me, landing like a crumpled up outfit on the floor. I was aware that it was my own body laying on the floor, but it lacked all structure and form. And to see what I now looked like, free of my outer form, I saw that I also illuminated the same light and was of the same form as each of these magnificent entities of light. Before me, 3 more illuminated entities appeared. 2 of them gently picked up my discarded shell of a body, while the 3rd entity, who entered carrying a large bowl of crystal water, began washing my body with a soft crystal sponge. The original 3 entities described to me that there are many layers to each embodiment of an individual, and while my physical body was lying in bed at home, I was at this point still attached to that body via a cord of life. The body that was now being washed with the crystal water was another layer of my being. They explained to me that the entities were washing me with the crystal water to assist in the healing of my body, telling me that my physical body was very weak and severely damaged. I asked them why I was there and why my family didn't try to stop me from moving forward. I was told that I had left my body due to the extreme trauma of illness and that my soul was being drawn home back to God. They also told told me that no one tried to stop me because their consciousness was not prepared for me to die, and they were all physically unaware that I was crossing over. The path was my soul's expression of my journey home, and I was shown the people in my life as a reminder of the impact I had on them. The entities then walked me toward 3 large altars, each holding a unique statue of gold and precious metals. The first is the brightest and tallest, approximately 15 feet high. It appeared that each altar was a symbolic representation of a spiritual gift that they were bestowing on me. Behind the 3 altars was a darkened passageway that seemed to be a barrier between the physical and spiritual worlds. Stopping at the base of the first altar, I was told that I am not to go any further on this path for now. Somehow I knew that if they showed me the wonders and beauty of what lies beyond these statues, I would not return to my family. I understood that it was important to keep my attention there, knowing that if more of the mystery of the spirit realm was revealed to me, it would forever hold my attention captive. One of the entities then said to me, "You are being given 3 gifts. The first one is the gift of sight." Instantly many images appeared before me simultaneously. I watched multiple video clips showing my husband and children and the lives they lived without me. How my husband became so despondent in his grief that he focused his attention on work to stay busy, but removed himself from family gatherings, living the rest of his life in loneliness. He surrounded himself with clutter and shut out the world around him. How my sisters and mother would reach out to Scott trying to include him in family dinners, but they reminded him too much of me, so he distanced himself. How my oldest daughter Charlie moved back home to raise her 2 younger sisters. This in turn prevented her from meeting the person that she was to marry. I saw how my siblings would be in conversations together trying to make sense of what took place. I saw Audrey's wedding to her then boyfriend and how her heart ached to share her wedding day with me. I saw that my son lived with his father for 2 more years and then moved away from the family that loved him, leaving him feeling lost in the world. How Charlie and Chloe would have long conversations about what they remembered about me until they laughed or cried. How Chloe struggled to fit in with any of her peers because none of them understood the void of not having a mother. It saddened me to watch glimpses of each of them growing up in the heartache that they were forced to experience, but they, as with most people, eventually moved on and truly did seem to be okay, just as they told me on the path. I was then shown images of my youngest daughter Sophie being only 7 years old. I was shown that the trauma of losing me hit her the hardest. I saw that although my older children were severely affected by the loss of their mother, they would manage and were able to continue on with their lives. Sophie did not have the emotional resilience to recover from the trauma of losing her mother. The entities told me that Charlie and Chloe had each other to lean on and created a special bond for healing and strength. Audrey had the support of her husband and friends. Donnie and remained reserved but had resiliency. The entities made it clear that Sophie would not live out her life purpose without me. They did not share with me what her purpose was, but expressed that I was an integral part of her life purpose. When they showed me images of her life, she did not progress. All that I could see of her was that she was frozen in trauma. Seeing the damage that this would be on Sophie shocked me. I turned toward the entities of light and said to them, "I have to go back. Sophie needs me." In an instant I was back in my bed, back in the density of my physical body, and back in unimaginable pain. There was no longer a glow in my room. It was dark and lonely, but I had a passion inside of me to heal. I could hear the TV still on down the hall. I could hear that the Simpsons was over, but knew that the battle for my life had just commenced. I glanced over at the clock again and saw that 8 minutes had passed since I left my body in the other dimension. It was timeless. I began my battle to stay in my body. I needed to heal and to raise my family. Sophie did need me, but so did Chloe and Scott and the rest of my family. I lifted my hands in front of my face, no longer illuminating golden light, now appearing nearly lifeless and weak. I gently touched them to my stomach, which hurt so badly, quietly saying to myself, "Please God, let me heal." My body was so weak that I still didn't have the strength to talk. Even if I wanted to share with my family what just took place, I didn't have the energy to do so. I was sure there would be many questions that I didn't have the answers to. My sympathetic nervous system was still on high alert. I could feel that my eyes were strained open and my nervous system was still shaking my body. I kept gently stroking my hands across the different parts of my body and internally repeating to myself, "Choose to live, I choose to live." I knew that Scott would soon bring the girls into our room to circle around me for our nightly family prayer. This was a ritual that he maintained. When they came in, Sophie stood at my right side with Scott and Chloe next to I was so weak and in such deep pain that I could scarcely respond to Scott holding my hand. I remained quiet with no voice to share what had just taken place. Scott prayed for my healing and for comfort for our family. He prayed for our children to be protected and to know that they are loved. When he finished the prayer, Sophie leaned in and laid her sweet face against mine. I could feel her warmth on my cheek as she whispered in my ear, "I need you, Mommy." My heart ached. I desperately wanted to respond to her, "I am here with you. I promise to never leave. I promise to heal." My prayers deepened, and so did my determination to keep those promises that were left unsaid as the soft cascade of tears streamed down my face and pulled into my ears. My daughter needed me and I needed to live. Oh God, please help me live. After my NDE, I was mostly bedridden for nearly 8 months and spent years healing and restoring my health. The above excerpt is taken from my book that I wrote regarding my NDE and the healing journey. My book is titled The Secret to Healing and Recovery. Note from Jen with an amazing story. I'm going to check out your book. Would you mind posting in the comments section where others may find your book? Also, I am sorry to hear about what happened to your husband and the issues with the law. No family should ever have to worry about that. I am glad that you were able to return to not only share your story but to also be with your children. Anyway, enough of my jabbering.